Bonnie and Clyde, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, John Dillinger, Edwin Alonzo Boyd. All of them robbed banks and became folk heroes. None of them was exactly a latter-day Robin Hood, stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. They stole from the rich and kept the loot for themselves. But banks seem to be hated during hard times, and bank robbers often become legends, though most of them don't survive to write their memoirs, unlike Stephen Reid. Stephen Reid, from Massey in Northern Ontario, was a member of a group of bank robbers whose style and precision earned them the nickname the Stopwatch Gang. They may well have been Canada's best bank robbers. In all, they were convicted of 13 armed robberies and suspected in 31 more. And with the same precision with which they robbed banks, they also escaped from prison. So far between them, a total of 5 times. But like many talented Canadians, they outgrew their own country and eventually became part of Canada's brain drain to the south.
In 1971, 21-year-old Stephen Reid was sent to prison for robbing a bank. 2 years later, allowed out for the day, the persuasive Reid convinced his guards to stretch the rules a bit.
So I said, well, let's go for dinner after. There's a Chinese. I said, God, I haven't had Chinese food forever. Oh, Steve, when I can't, we have to be back, and you're not supposed to stop. And I said, well, I haven't, come on, and they're nice people, and they stopped. And, they ordered dinner, and I said, I'll be right back, and hang on for tea, and I was gone.
It was 4 years before those guards saw Stephen Reid again. Today, at the age of 36, after a career which includes dozens of suspected bank robberies, 3 convictions, 1 gold heist, 2 escapes, and a novel, Reid is in prison in British Columbia with 9 years still to serve on a 21-year term. His running now confined to the inside of the penitentiary walls. It was 2 years ago that Susan Musgrave, one of Canada's best-known poets, first read Stephen Reid's unpublished manuscript. She eventually helped him to find a literary agent and then a publisher. And once a week ever since, she's driven 4 hours each way from her home on Half Moon Bay on Vancouver Island to visit him in jail.
I didn't know anything about bank robbers. I had no feelings that I was on their side or anything before I read this book, but it really was a very intimate view into I could tell this writer knew what he was talking about, and that's always exciting when you're reading, you get an inside glimpse into a world you'll never know anything about otherwise.
For 15 years, Stephen Reid's world has revolved around 2 close associates. Paddy Mitchell, the former boxing champion at the Ottawa Boys Club, and Lionel Wright, once a quiet copy clerk for the Ottawa Citizen, usually known as Lionel the Ghost. 3 pals from Ontario whose bank-robbing prowess has earned them a place in the files of the FBI as the Stopwatch Gang. The gang got its start in Ottawa, in a part of the national capital that few people know. Here on Preston Street, they say the neighborhood gets tougher as the house numbers get lower. Paddy Mitchell grew up near the end of the street. By 18, Mitchell had already established himself as a petty criminal. By the time he met Stephen Reid in Ottawa, he was a well-known man about town who became Reid's big brother.
He'd come down, he'd say, here, Steve, here's 500, so you got some pocket money, and look, you don't have many clothes, here's, I'm about your size anyway, why don't you take a few of my things. Meanwhile, I got the price tag still on him, he just kind of bought them for me, and so he'd come down with all this stuff, and come on over and meet my girlfriend's sister, she's so-and-so, and we'll go over here. And he would take, and he'd go out of his way to do that, and of course, Paddy was like a really high, well-established thief in the higher echelon of the Ottawa thing, so as a 23-year-old kid, I'm impressed with that and going along with it.
So it was that in the taverns along Preston Street, Mitchell and Reid began to hatch the scheme for their first big score. Through an acquaintance at Air Canada, they learned that every so often a shipment of gold from Northern Ontario would arrive in Ottawa, bound for the Royal Canadian Mint. It would be unloaded with the rest of the cargo and kept overnight at the airport. Paddy's plan was simple. Stephen Reid would put on an Air Canada uniform and an airport ID card with this picture.
That puts you in the area where you want to be. From there, it's nothing to come out. Like once you're in there, you just come out this other way. Nobody's going to question you coming out. It's going in, right? And nobody's going to question you doing it. Boom, boom, boom. So away we go. We put our move. That's all I had to do was put it to him that way, and then just leave it with him like overnight. And you leave Paddy with something overnight, he'll come back and he'll tell you how to do it.
And the result was the biggest gold robbery in Canadian history.
I think so, yeah. I think so. We got a nice one out of that one.
In fact, it was even nicer than the headlines the next day indicated. The biggest gold robbery in Canadian history, 5 bars worth $750,000. But the acquaintance at Air Canada talked to the police. Reid and Mitchell went to Millhaven Penitentiary. Their escape plans here came to nothing until they were transferred to the medium security prison at Joyceville, Ontario. Reid soon became a member of the Prison Recreation Committee. In the wintertime, he enthusiastically watered the skating rink, and he was chosen to present a trophy on behalf of the inmates to the local junior hockey league. Given a pass for the day, he and his escort stopped for a meal in downtown Kingston. The last time it had been Chinese food, this time fish and chips.
We stopped at a seafood place. Said, "Geez, there's a nice." Oh, no, we know about. Come on, you guys haven't had fish forever, haven't you? No, none of that. You ain't going to. No, come on. All right. We go and see. Have it same. Be right back, guys. Just gonna go. Well, you're not gonna follow me to the washroom, are you?
When the meal came, the waitress said to me, "Would you like me to put his meal away in the oven to keep it warm?"
Escort Andy Houston.
I said, "Well, no, he's just gone to the washroom. He'll be right back." At this point, she indicated that he had left a minute or so earlier and gone down the stairs, which almost made my heart stop. I thought, oh no. And sure enough, he had left on me.
With Stephen Reid gone, Paddy Mitchell remained at Joyceville by himself, though Reid now says he had a feeling that Paddy might be leaving soon too.
I knew more than my heart he'd be gone.
How did he get out?
I knew in my notebook he'd be gone. I left in August, and he left in November. And he escaped about 2 months later after I escaped, and he faked a heart attack. He was out running around the yard, and he collapses, falls over, and they rush him down to the hospital with this heart attack.
Semi-conscious, eyes glazed, his pulse weak, Paddy Mitchell was put in leg irons and handcuffs and rushed to hospital in Kingston.
As we opened the back doors, there was another officer who had followed us down, was approaching the ambulance from the rear.
Guard Dennis Bowen.
2 who we thought hospital attendants were running from behind him towards the ambulance. We thought they were coming to give us a hand. They were dressed in white hospital gowns, white hospital hats, white masks, and they ran towards us, but they were carrying guns. That's when we realized they weren't hospital people.
Unnamed individuals.
Unnamed. I don't think...
You're not seriously sitting here and telling me that those individuals weren't Steve Reid and Lionel Wright, are you?
I'm telling you dead square they weren't. I think that they think I did that, but no, I can't even, I don't...
Steve, not only may they think you did it, I think you did it.
I think Paddy thinks I did it. Everybody in the world thinks I did it. No.
Certainly everywhere in Canada, Stephen Reid and Paddy Mitchell were wanted men. They needed a place to hide out, and they found it in the wild American West, a foreign country where you didn't need to learn a new language. Just add a twang to your voice, and you could get by in Arizona. After taking a wrong turn from Las Vegas, they happened upon the perfect sanctuary. 2 hours north of Phoenix, just outside the little town of Sedona, up Oak Creek Canyon Road. For Reid, Mitchell, and Wright, this wasn't just a hole in the wall. It was a little piece of paradise. They settled into this house under new names. Paddy became Michael, Lionel became Ronnie, Steve was Timothy.
I became my alias. I became that person, and that was it. There was no more. Steve Reid was gone. It was Mr. Dress-Up time, and I could be whoever I wanted, and that's who I chose to be. And from then on, I could make up. I could have rich parents. I could have poor parents, and my mommy could be good-looking, and my daddy could go fishing. You know, I could do whatever I wanted from that point on. Paddy was murdered like that. He was always lying to people. He'd always be telling them all kinds of extravagant stories, and I'd wake up in the morning and find out all these weird lies and go, oh, God, what'd you tell him last night? But that's what you could do, and I was playing for keeps.
Stephen Reid took to life in Arizona in a high-flying way. He earned his pilot's license and spent hours in the air with Jack Seeley, the owner of Air Sedona. Reid told Seeley that he and his friends staged light shows for rock concerts. As far as Seeley was concerned, the man he was flying with was typical of people in the West Coast entertainment business, with free time on his hands and a lot of money to spend. Jack and Judy Seeley.
He was out of town occasionally, and he'd come back. Other than being out of town, he didn't seem to have any meaningful gains of employment here, but that didn't That's not uncommon in this town. There's an awful lot of people who live here and work somewhere else. Every time he'd go out of town for any length of time, he'd always bring us little gifts back. He went to Vermont, came back with some maple syrup for Judy and the funniest flying school T-shirt you ever saw for me.
He was a good friend,
Yeah,
I gather.
yeah.
Did he have a lavish lifestyle? Did he spread cash around?
Not particularly. Anytime you went to dinner, he always bought. He wouldn't have it any other way. He always picked up the check. But I wouldn't say lavish. He didn't leave stupendous tips or, you know.
It was just part of his everyday life, and I've got it, I want to spend it on my friends, but I'm not going to make a big production out of it.
They didn't know it in Sedona, but when Steve and his pals were out of town on business, they were on the road, always out of state, earning their reputation as the Stopwatch Gang. The FBI suspects them of 31 bank robberies throughout the United States. Little was left to chance. The gang devoted long days to their first priority, getting to know their banks.
I probably know more about banks than most bankers know about banks. We go to work in the United States. I went to work every day from Monday to Friday for months and months on end. I would get up on Monday. I kept banking hours. I went out, we went out, and I got bank accounts across from San Diego up to New Hampshire. I mean, from one end of that country to the other. And we have checking and saving account and banks all over.
But every time they returned to Arizona, it was like coming home again. Here they felt happy and safe. In Sedona, the trio seemed to fit right in. Stephen Reid became friends with the town's deputy sheriff, and he began a lengthy program of dental work with orthodontist George Moore.
Were there clues? Are there things which should have tipped you off that this was no ordinary patient?
The change in wardrobe was a little bit different. You know, people starting out Levi's and just a regular white T-shirt, and as each time they come in, they have nicer and nicer clothes, to the point where he had designer jeans, nice shirt, and gold bracelets, gold rings, and that's a little different. And paying in cash for an entire dental bill in 20s.
How big a bill are we talking about?
$1,500. That's a lot of money, in 20s especially.
Well, one time he was down at the house, and he was waiting for Jack. Jack wasn't home, and we were talking, and he made just kind of a silly little comment, well, Jude, I'm running out of money. I'm going to have to go out of town and go back to work again.
Back to work this time in San Diego, California, where the gang prepared themselves for their next big job.
It's research. It's all research. And what we do when going into research, when going into the last part of something, you know, for a month or two, it's like having an expense account. You know, you say, okay, the nut's going to cost this, you know, and I got 2 months to go. Okay, so I need an apartment close to the score. We need the following artillery. I need the following apparel, 3 cars, these things. So that's about 10 grand. Plus I spend 10 grand because you got to live well. You got to be out. It's all part of it's part of a package. You have to live well. You have to feel really confident. Like you have to go down. You have to be having.
You feel good if you have a nice meal at a restaurant before a score, if you have a good bottle of wine. Buoys your self-image.
That's part of the life. That's part of the life is that you do reap the rewards and that you do act lavish and extravagant at times. And you know, I've flown first class from one end of the country to the other, and because I'm hungover, I'll reserve and pay for 2 first-class seats because I don't want somebody sitting beside me because I'm hungover.
It was pretty nice work if you could get it, settling in by the beach in San Diego, absorbing local color, spending more than most bank robbers ever make just to set up the perfect score. By eliminating banks too close to the police, by monitoring security and watching the comings and goings of cash, they finally settled upon the Pacific Beach branch of the Bank of America.
I love to work on the score, and I love counting the money after. I don't look forward to doing the thing itself in any kind of way. In fact, and when it's time to go, you set your teeth and act like a professional, and usually it works out. You know, if you start thinking. In going into a bank, going in, there's a guard with a gun, but you got a gun too. But you got a gun and a plan. You got a gun, a plan, and surprise.
On September 23rd, 1980, at 10:45 in the morning, the plan was to surprise an armed guard carrying out the bank's receipts from the previous week.
You know, his name was Harley something. He had them mirrored sunglasses. He'd look at all the women. He'd be looking at them like this, you know, as they're walking by him. He'd go, give it one of these, and that's exactly what he was doing. I'm coming like this, and he's got 2 hands on a cart, and he's running along with his cart and this big old thing, and he's mirror sunglasses. He's going, like this, he's following this broad, and when his face gets back to about here, he's got a gun stuck in the side of his nose.
Harlan Hudson.
And he just informed me that this was a holdup. Don't be a hero, or I'll kill you.
Those were his exact words?
Yes, sir. And as he was talking, he reached down and, with his left hand, still with the papers, and removed my weapon. At that time, the man in the back informed the people in the bank that it was a holdup.
Was there any doubt in your mind then that when he said, "Don't be a hero or I'll kill you," he would do it?
No, none whatsoever.
The bank surveillance cameras recorded a classic Stopwatch Gang job. It was all over within 2 minutes. They got away with $283,000 in cash, the biggest armed bank robbery in San Diego history.
Is there any doubt to you that when you come into a bank with a gun in your hand, if it comes right down to it and you have to, you'll use that gun?
That's the parole board's #1 question, by the way. But yeah, I can't. There's no doubt that that's if a policeman comes upon a bank, if he wants to come into a bank robbery that's in progress that Steve Reid's in, it's not. Yeah, okay, let's go to jail. They know that, and I know that, and that's the way that would work. I think is that we avoid those particular situations. Do I want it? Would I use a gun? Either or. There have been many, many times I've been jumped in a bank, been grabbed by people in a bank. People haven't done what I've told them to do in a bank. I've had really outright violent things against me. I've been beat up. People wanted to take my guns.
And you are a bank robber, Steve. I would think these things might be occupational hazards.
And I still haven't shot them. I still haven't had to shoot them. You can just about do anything you want if you know what you're doing with a gun. You can because people do want to listen to you.
In the course of your career, have you ever shot anyone?
Myself, me. That's it.
How?
I'm my biggest. Just same way other people, I think hunters and that shoot themselves, fooling around, being smart, and sitting at a kitchen table, getting ready to go. I not only shot myself, I shot another guy that was with me, that was going to work with me that day.
24 hours after what seemed like the perfect crime, the Stopwatch Gang was back in Arizona. But 5 weeks later, driving along this road not far from Sedona, the FBI intercepted Stephen Reid. They got Lionel Wright at home in bed. Paddy Mitchell was nowhere to be found. Reid and Wright were returned to California and charged with robbing the San Diego bank.
According to the FBI, their big break in the case came 2 days after the robbery, when they discovered a garbage bag in this park in San Diego. Inside the bag were wigs, theatrical makeup, false beards, license plates, apparently from the getaway car, and Bank of America money bags, on which they found the fingerprints of Stephen Reid and Paddy Mitchell. After all that planning, it seemed, the gang had been tripped up by a little bad housekeeping. But there may also have been something else behind it, an old pal from Canada who'd turned informer.
His name was Don Hollingworth. He was a high school football star who went on to play professionally for the Ottawa Rough Riders. Eventually, he helped Reid and Mitchell sell their stolen gold. And later in California, in trouble with the law and using the name John Walters, he bargained for his freedom with what he knew about his old Ottawa acquaintances, the Stopwatch Gang. Stephen Reid's San Diego lawyer, Michael McCabe.
I think that John Walters traded his skin for Reid and Wright's skin, and that he's the one who led them to Sedona, and that the actual, marvelous police work, which was cited, was after the fact to cover the government's trail and John Walters' trail, and to maintain his identity as a secret, as the person who was ultimately responsible for having them arrested.
When they were arrested in Sedona, Stephen Reid and Lionel Wright were facing long sentences for the bank job in San Diego. How did they try to improve that situation?
Well, they hoped to improve it by returning some of the loot that had been stolen, and that's why an arrangement was made for them to make a money drop, basically, at a pre-designated bank at a night depository for the purpose of helping their situation out by showing good faith.
From jail, Reid and Wright arranged for a go-between to get the money and deliver it to a bank for the FBI. Not knowing he had turned them in, they entrusted the job to their old friend, Don Hollingworth, alias John Walters. When the FBI arrived, they found the envelopes contained not $100 bills, but pieces of a San Diego newspaper. John Walters kept the money. Stephen Reid and Lionel Wright got 20 years. Reid and Wright were returned to serve their sentences in Canada. Lionel Wright was sent to Dorchester in New Brunswick, Stephen Reid first to Millhaven, then to Kent in British Columbia. His two pals were behind bars, but Paddy Mitchell was still at large in the U.S., and now he was working alone. Diamond's Department Store, Phoenix, Arizona, a daring daytime holdup. According to police, a masked gunman leapt the cashier's counter, thrust a gun into the teller's mouth, and got almost $90,000. Detective Ed Harden, who happened to be in the store at the time, fired 2 shots at the suspect and finally caught him in the parking lot.
I pulled down on him again like this, and I said, you know, if you move that car, I'm going to kill you.
What did he say? What did he do?
He threw his hands up like this, and the car was still moving backward. And he obviously put his foot on the brake, and he started to scream. The window was closed. And I could hear him very plainly. He was screaming, "Don't shoot, don't shoot, I've got a gun on my lap." And I told him to take one of his hands down, put the car into park, open the car door, and roll out onto the asphalt.
The man was arrested and taken into custody. When he arrived at Phoenix Police Headquarters for interrogation, he was still wearing 2 sets of clothes, those in which he'd committed the robbery and those in which he'd hoped to make his getaway. And underneath it all, in the Arizona heat, he was perspiring heavily.
He told me he was concerned, or he was not sweating from that, he was sweating because he almost got killed.
Detective Jim Thomas.
He told me that the officer shot at him and scared him.
How did he phrase it? How did he say it?
As I recall, it was comments to where you ought to do something with him. He almost killed me. And I thought it was comical because this guy just did approximately $90,000 robbery with a gun, and he's out there bad-mouthing or talking against the officer that was trying to apprehend him and did fire 2 shots at him.
The suspect said he was Richard J. Landry of New Orleans, Louisiana, and he had a wallet full of identification to prove it. With no arrests on Landry's record, bail was set at $16,000. It was paid in $100 bills.
He had a checking account. He had the registration to his car. He had several gas credit cards. He had a Playboy Club card. As I recall, he even had his birth certificate, which that was another thing I thought was extremely strange, because I thought, well, how many people have I seen that actually carry a copy of their birth certificate with them in their wallet? I thought that was weird, and when I began to search into it, that's when I discovered that the identification was false.
A month afterwards, the suspect long gone, the Phoenix police learned from the RCMP that Richard J. Landry of New Orleans was really Paddy Mitchell from Ottawa. The FBI finally found Mitchell in Astachula, Florida. He eventually got 18 years in the Arizona State Prison. But it wasn't long before Paddy was back in the news again.
News Center 10. Here's where the escape started, in the corner of an empty visitation room. 3 inmates climbed on top of this pop machine, pushed open a ceiling panel, and crawled into an air conditioning duct. Steel bars inside the ducts are supposed to prevent such escapes, but apparently the bars were cut with a hacksaw.
The inmates cut this air conditioning duct and then dropped down into a file room. They walked over here and knocked out some cement blocks and then crawled along the top of this duct into a utility room.
They dropped to the floor along this back wall and walked just a few feet to an outside door. It's supposed to be locked, but on Friday it was not.
The girlfriend of one of the escapees was waiting in the parking lot. She later told the police that she thought they had a special weekend pass.
From the front door of the Arizona State Prison, Paddy Mitchell was driven to Phoenix and dropped off here at the main entrance of Sky Harbor International Airport. As one Phoenix policeman put it, knowing Paddy, with prepaid tickets waiting at the check-in desk, probably first class. That was more than 6 months ago. Paddy Mitchell hasn't been seen since. If you were Paddy Mitchell, where would you be now?
Not on this show. I don't know. I hope he's watching. I don't know. Paddy wants to go, and I'll tell you what Paddy wants. He wants something really simple. He wants a coconut tree and a wahine and a 17-year-old to be left in peace and to make $1.27 every 2 weeks or something and think, where would he be? As far away as he can be, I guess. He can't run far enough anymore.
If Mitchell is ever caught, he has 15 years left on his sentence in the U.S. and 17 in Canada. Now in his mid-40s, he'll be an old man when he gets out. Lionel Wright still has 13 years to serve. Stephen Reid, almost 9. But Reid now has something else to look forward to. In prison, he taught himself to write. He's turned his past into a book, and that book has in turn changed his life. Writer and editor Susan Musgrave.
Some editor once said you can tell how good a book's going to be by the first 3 lines, and the first 3 lines were really great. So I put great opening, and the second paragraph was excellent, so I put excellent. And the third paragraph, there was some really unusual image, so I put brilliant. And then I thought, this is ridiculous. I mean, who is this person? And I started reading. By page 15, I wasn't writing any more comments. I was just reading, which I suppose is the ultimate compliment when you're reading as an editor.
At what point did that literary enthusiasm of yours become something else?
I think a lot. I really haven't tried to analyze it. As I say, just the way the book lifted me up for so many weeks. I wanted to meet him really badly, so I kept writing, saying, "Can I get on your visiting list?" You know, and I didn't know anything about prisons at all, really. And he said, "Send me your DOB." I had no idea what that was. I figured out it was date of birth, but you learn a lot about initials when you're in prison. Everybody is an AW, or all these things that stand for Ludos, and I knew nothing about any of it, and still, I'm still learning a lot. But then I finally got on his visiting list, and I went to meet him at Millhaven in December 6, 1984.
For no man ever yet hates his own flesh, but nourishes it.
On October 12, 1986, Susan Musgrave and Stephen Reid were married.
Joined as in the name of God.
The traditional Anglican ceremony took place at the Kent Maximum Security Penitentiary in Agassiz, BC. The bride's 4-year-old daughter, Charlotte, was her flower girl. The groom's 2 best friends were conspicuous by their absence.
For as much as Stephen and Susan have consented together in holy wedlock, have declared the same before God, and in the presence of us all, I pronounce them man and wife, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
I suppose there are a lot of people who do fall in love with characters in books. Few would end up marrying them. Is this a risk you're taking?
Hardly anybody says, "Oh, that's great, you're going to have a wonderful life together." And we both know it's going to be hard. I mean, probably harder than this part where he's in prison and I'm out. Just adjusting, living together, I have a daughter. It'll be really hard, but I've never felt that I really wanted to go through that much with anybody, and with him I do.
Is this the end of the career of one of Canada's most notorious bank robbers?
It's the end of the bank robbing career, but I don't think it's the end of. It's not the end of me, but it's the end of what I did. An era's over, or whatever you want. An era. God, that sounds awful lofty. No, but our time is over. I talked to Paddy about it in a letter, and I've talked to Lionel at length about it since '80, and it's over.
Though he officially had several years remaining on his sentence, Stephen Reid became eligible for early release this year. Since we prepared that story, he was transferred from maximum to medium security and recently to the minimum security William Head Institution outside Victoria. Yesterday, Stephen Reid was paroled, and he and his wife, Susan Musgrave, went off to start their life together on Vancouver Island. Reid is currently working on a number of writing projects, including a collection of the favorite recipes of well-known criminals, which he'll call the Crook Book.